My name is Naomi Carter. I'm 27 years old. And the first time my parents told me I had 2 days to get out of the house my grandparents left behind, I didn't scream, cry, or ask them how they could do this to me. I just stood there in the kitchen doorway with my hand still wrapped around a cold coffee mug, listening as my mother spoke in that soft, fake, calm voice she used whenever she wanted to sound reasonable while saying something cruel. My father stood beside her like the decision had already been stamped and filed, and my younger sister leaned against the counter with the kind of smug little smile people wear when they think the ending is already theirs. They said the house was too much for me, that I was being selfish, that a family home should go to the daughter who was about to get married and build a real future. Then came the deadline. Friday, 2 days. Pack my personal things, leave the keys, and don't make it ugly. What they wanted was a fight. They wanted tears, begging, maybe one last desperate argument they could twist later into proof that I was unstable and ungrateful. But I already knew something they didn't. I knew what was sitting in the wall safe upstairs. I knew why my grandfather stopped looking worried in the final weeks of his life. And I knew that if they opened that safe believing they had already won, the look on their faces would be worth every second I had spent staying quiet. So I nodded once, said okay, and walked away like a woman who had just lost everything. Behind me, I heard my sister laugh under her breath. Behind them, the whole house stayed still, like it was waiting. And by the time my mother was calling me over and over again, her voice shaking, begging me not to do this, it was already too late. Before I tell you what was inside that safe and why my family went from celebrating to panicking in less than half an hour, tell me what time it is where you are right now and where you're listening from, because I really want to know how far this story reaches. The truth is, by the time they gave me those 2 days, I had already spent years learning exactly who mattered to them and who did not. My grandparents' house in Stone Mill Point was the only place I had ever felt chosen instead of tolerated. It sat on a quiet rise above the water. A stone farmhouse with deep windowsills, old pine floors, and a back porch that caught the last gold light every evening. To strangers, it looked like valuable coastal property. To me, it was the place where my grandmother taught me how to make blueberry cobbler without measuring cups, and where my grandfather taught me that a person's character always shows up when no one is forcing them to be decent. 3 years before he died, everything changed. My grandmother started forgetting little things first. Then she forgot bigger ones. She left tea boiling on the stove. She put the sugar in the refrigerator. She once looked right at me and called me by her sister's name. My grandfather tried to keep the house steady, but I could see the fear in him long before he ever admitted it out loud. I was in graduate school then, working toward my master's degree in healthcare administration, driving back and forth every weekend from Providence, then every few days, then almost every day by the end. I became the one who knew which pharmacy still had her prescriptions in stock. I became the one who kept the pill organizer filled, called the home nurse, paid the heating bill online, and sat through long, silent evenings while the television played to a room that no longer felt sure of time. My parents always had an excuse. There was a business trip, there was a client dinner, there was a gala. There was always some emergency in their own lives that somehow outranked the slow collapse happening in this house. My younger sister Chloe was worse because at least my parents knew they were neglecting something. Chloe treated the whole thing like an inconvenience that ruined the mood. She came once with flowers, took 3 pictures by the hydrangeas, posted one online with a caption about cherishing family, then left before dinner because she had reservations with friends in Newport. I remember standing at the sink washing dishes while she laughed on the porch, talking loudly on the phone about how depressing old houses smelled. My grandmother was asleep in the next room. My grandfather heard every word. He did not say anything then, but I saw the way his jaw locked. That look came back many times in the last year of his life. The more I showed up, the less my family did. It became a pattern too obvious to ignore. My mother would call and ask whether certain documents were still in the study. My father would ask if the property taxes had gone up again. Chloe would walk through the rooms like she was already planning where to put new furniture. No one asked me if I was sleeping. No one asked how I was managing graduate exams while helping two people decline in front of me. No one asked what it cost to be the one who stayed. My grandfather noticed all of it. When my grandmother died, he changed in a way that scared me. He got quieter, but clearer, almost sharper. It was like grief burned the fog out of him and left only the truth. 2 weeks after her funeral, I was helping him into bed when he squeezed my wrist and said, very calmly, "They think I don't know what they're waiting for." I asked him what he meant, even though I already knew. He looked toward the hallway, toward the study, toward the whole house, and said, "They're not waiting for me to get better, Naomi. They're waiting for me to be done." I did not answer because there was nothing I could say that would make that less cruel. He exhaled slowly and added, "You are the only one who ever came here for us. Everyone else came here for what comes after us." That was the night I understood that the story my family would tell later was never going to be about love or fairness. It was going to be about possession. I just didn't know yet how far they were willing to go. A week after that conversation, my grandfather asked me to drive him into town. He said he needed to see a lawyer about routine estate housekeeping, and he said it in such a casual tone that someone who did not know him might have believed it. But I knew him. I knew when he was pretending something was smaller than it really was. We drove to a brick office near the marina where a local estate attorney named Ethan Rowe had practiced for more than 30 years. He was not flashy. He was not the kind of lawyer my father bragged about knowing at the club. He was quiet, exact, and impossible to rush. My grandfather trusted him, which was enough for me. I stayed in the waiting room at first, but about 20 minutes later, Ethan opened the door and asked me to come in. My grandfather was sitting straighter than he had in months. There was a file on the desk, a notary stamp nearby, and a yellow legal pad covered in Ethan's small, neat handwriting. My grandfather looked at me and said, "I need you to listen carefully because I am done pretending your parents are going to do the right thing on their own." What he told me that afternoon changed everything. Years earlier, he and my grandmother had made a will that left the house and the rest of the estate to their son and daughter-in-law under the assumption that family would behave like family. That assumption was gone. In its place, Ethan had prepared a new structure, an irrevocable trust. The house would be transferred into it. The purpose was not to make me rich. That mattered to him. He said it more than once. "This is not a reward, Naomi. This is protection." The trust named me sole trustee and gave me the right to live in the house and preserve it. It also made it difficult for anyone to pressure me into selling, mortgaging, or giving it away. Ethan even explained that if anyone later tried to challenge the arrangement, the structure itself would make impulsive family sabotage much harder. My grandfather had thought this through in painful detail. He had seen exactly what was coming. I remember saying, "They'll hate me for this." And Ethan, without looking up from the page he was organizing, said, "They will hate the boundary, not the truth." People who feel entitled to something always call it cruelty when you refuse to hand it over. My grandfather signed that day. The notary stamped the papers. I signed where Ethan told me to sign. When we got back to the house, my grandfather was exhausted, but relieved in a way I had not seen in a long time. Over the next month, Ethan and I quietly handled what needed to be handled. After my grandfather passed, I met Ethan again, finalized the trust transfer, and recorded the documents properly. But I did not announce it. That part was strategic. Ethan advised me to wait because he believed my family would reveal their intentions much more clearly if they thought I was defenseless. He was right. That was when I prepared the safe. The wall safe in the upstairs study had always fascinated my family because they assumed anything old and important had to be locked inside it. So I made sure that when they finally opened it, they would find exactly what they deserved to find. Inside the safe, I placed a sealed envelope with my grandfather's handwriting on the front. I included a notarized copy of the trust documents, a short letter from Ethan confirming the effective transfer, and a flash drive containing an audio recording my grandfather had made during his final weeks. On top of all of that, I placed one single sheet of paper in plain view. It said, "If you are reading this because you came looking for something to take, then you already know why you were left out." I knew my mother would open the envelope with shaking hands. I knew my father would go silent first, which was always how he reacted when he realized control was slipping. And I knew Chloe would keep insisting there had to be some mistake, because people like my sister never believe consequences are real until they hit them in the face. So when they stood in my kitchen and told me Friday was my deadline, I did not argue, because the real deadline was not mine. It was theirs. Friday was the day their fantasy was going to collide with paper, signatures, and the one thing greedy people never respect until it ruins them: proof. The 2 days between their threat and Friday were some of the strangest of my life, because I had to look like a woman preparing to lose her home while actually preparing to keep it. I packed enough boxes to make the performance believable. I labeled some with books, winter coats, kitchen things, even though I never intended to move them out. I carried them into the guest room where anyone glancing through the doorway would think I was giving up. At the same time, I backed up every email, saved every text message, and forwarded copies of everything to Ethan. My mother called Wednesday morning in a syrupy voice and asked whether I had found a place to stay. She said she was worried about me being alone. Then, in the same breath, she reminded me not to take the antique silver because that was family property. My father called later pretending to be reasonable. He said dragging things out would only embarrass everyone. He used the word everyone the way men like him always do, as if preserving his own comfort was a public service. Chloe texted me a picture of a white kitchen she liked and wrote, "This would look amazing once the house feels younger." I stared at that message for a full minute. The house where my grandmother lost her memory and my grandfather lost his wife was, to my sister, a before picture. Thursday night, my mother switched tactics. She showed up alone with a paper bag of pastries from a bakery I used to like in college and asked if we could please act like adults. She stood in the doorway in a cream coat that probably cost more than my first semester of textbooks and told me the family was under a lot of stress, that Chloe's wedding was coming, that my father had sacrificed so much for us, that maybe I was making this harder than it needed to be. I let her speak. I let her try guilt, nostalgia, softness, and martyrdom. Then I said I was tired and closed the door. By Friday afternoon, the house felt like it was holding its breath. The sky was flat and cold, the kind of Rhode Island gray that makes the water look like metal. They arrived just before 5, exactly when they had said they would. My father came first, carrying himself like a man who expected the scene to go his way, because scenes usually did. My mother followed, already acting offended by my silence. Chloe came last, all bright lipstick and confidence, wearing tall boots she probably should not have worn on gravel. She looked around the foyer and said, "Is this all you packed?" Not even trying to hide the insult in her voice, I said nothing. My father asked for the safe key. I told him it was where it had always been, in the top drawer of the study desk. I wanted to be there when they opened it, but I stood back just enough to make it look like I had no strength left to fight. That mattered. I wanted them comfortable. I wanted them careless. The study smelled faintly like cedar and old paper. My father moved straight to the safe. My mother stood near the window with her arms folded tight. Chloe leaned over his shoulder the way she used to lean over bakery cases when she was deciding which dessert to take without paying for it herself. The door clicked open. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then my father went still. My mother stepped forward and said, "What is it?" as if the answer might still be something harmless. He pulled out the top sheet first. I watched his eyes move across the sentence. Then I watched the color drain out of his face. My mother took the papers from him. She read faster, then slower, then once more like the words might rearrange themselves if she refused to accept them the first time. Chloe grabbed the flash drive and asked what this even was. Her voice had gone thin. My father ripped open my grandfather's letter and read in complete silence. That was the moment I knew they understood. Not emotionally, not morally. Legally. The room changed. Everything in it changed. The confidence was gone. The performance was gone. My mother turned to me with a look I had never seen before. Not because she had never felt it, but because she had never needed to show it to me. Fear. Real fear. "Naomi," she said, and this time there was no softness in it. "What did you do?" I looked at her and said, "I followed instructions." Chloe started saying there had to be some mistake, that Grandpa would never do this to family, that this was manipulation, that someone had tricked him. And while she talked, my father kept reading, scanning every page like a man searching for the one sentence that would save him. There was none. They left 10 minutes later without pretending anything anymore. My mother forgot her purse on the study chair and had to come back for it. My father did not look at me when he walked out. Chloe did, and if hatred had temperature, the room would have cracked from it. Then the phone calls started. My mother called 6 times in 10 minutes, then 8 more. Then she left a voicemail so breathless it sounded like she had run upstairs. "Naomi, please do not file anything else. Please call me back before you talk to the lawyer. We need to discuss this as a family." Then another voicemail, colder this time. "You do not understand what you are doing." Then another, shaking again. "Please, please do not do this." I did not answer a single one. I saved every message, sat at the kitchen table and listened to their panic stack up in my inbox, one call at a time. By Saturday morning, the war had moved outside the house and into the town, which was exactly where my mother always liked to fight. Stone Mill Point was the kind of place where the grocery store cashier knew who had just had surgery and who was drinking too much and who had let their front hedges die. News traveled fast, but so did sympathy if you packaged it correctly. My mother had always been good at that. She could turn cruelty into concern so smoothly that people thanked her for it. By noon, 2 people had texted me asking if I was really trying to take everything for myself. One woman from church, someone who had not visited my grandparents once while they were alive, wrote that my mother was devastated and just wanted peace. I almost laughed when I read that. My mother did not want peace. She wanted access. She wanted the house, the story, and the right to call herself the injured one after trying to push me out of my own home. Ethan had warned me this would happen. He told me that in property disputes, people did not just fight over assets. They fought over narrative. Whoever looked more sympathetic often gained leverage even when the paperwork was solid. So instead of responding emotionally, I built a file. I saved every voicemail. I printed every text. I exported every email Chloe had sent me over the last month. One of them was especially useful because she had forgotten to be careful and forwarded me an exchange with a wedding planner asking whether late summer would be a better time to host an engagement dinner at the house before listing it the following spring. Listing it. There it was. Not preserving it. Not living in it. Not honoring family. Selling it. Ethan nearly smiled when I showed him that email, which for him was the equivalent of laughing out loud. He also helped me gather records I never thought I would need to prove something that should have been obvious. Copies of pharmacy deliveries I had signed for. Receipts from grocery runs, invoices for repairs I arranged, calendar notes, gas station charges from the long drives back and forth while I was in graduate school. The home nurse even wrote a statement saying I was the only family member who consistently coordinated care during my grandparents' decline. Meanwhile, my parents kept making mistakes. My father sent me a message that said, "You have made your point. Sign over shared management and we can all walk away from this with dignity." Shared management meant give us the weapon back and trust us not to use it again. My mother tried a softer approach and wrote that legal conflict would only hurt Grandma's memory. I stared at that sentence for a long time because people like her always drag the dead into arguments they never bothered to show up for while those people were alive. The biggest gift came Sunday night. Chloe, furious and careless, sent a message meant for my mother to me by mistake. It read, "If she doesn't cooperate, tell Dad to push the debt angle. She'll fold if she thinks everyone will know why we need the sale." She unsent it a few seconds later, but not before I took a screenshot. Debt angle. That was the first time I knew for sure my father's financial situation was worse than anyone admitted publicly. Ethan dug a little deeper, legally and carefully, and by Monday he had enough to confirm what we suspected. My father's business was failing. A bank line had tightened. Personal debt was pressing. He had not wanted the house because it represented tradition. He wanted it because it represented escape. Once I understood that, everything clicked into place. The fake urgency, the 2-day deadline, the pressure. The sudden insistence that Chloe needed the house for her future. It was never about her future. She was just the prettier story they hoped would make theft look sentimental. The situation got uglier before it got better. My mother filed a civil petition challenging the trust. The argument was predictable. They claimed my grandfather had been too frail to understand what he signed, and that I had manipulated him while acting as caretaker. It was disgusting, but not surprising. When people cannot beat your documents, they attack your character. Ethan filed our response the same day and told me to prepare for a hearing. He also told me something that stayed with me. He said, "Truth matters in court, Naomi, but composure matters almost as much. They want you emotional. They want you to look unstable. Do not lend them your face for their story." So I did exactly what he said. I stopped reacting. I slept badly, but I showed up prepared. I wore a navy suit. I organized our binder. I brought my grandfather's audio recording, the nursing statement, the care logs, the repair invoices, the email about listing the house, and the screenshot about debt. By the time the hearing date arrived, I was no longer scared of losing the house. I was scared of hearing how easily the people who raised me could stand in public and lie about me with straight faces. Ethan told me to let them. He said sometimes the fastest way to destroy a false story is to give it enough space to reveal how unnatural it sounds. He was right about that too. The hearing was held on a Thursday morning in a county courtroom that smelled faintly like paper, coffee, and floor polish. It was not dramatic in the way movies make courtrooms dramatic. No one shouted at first. No one pounded tables. The danger in that room came from how calm everyone tried to look while preparing to cut each other open with words. My parents sat at the petitioner's table with Chloe between them, dressed in pale blue like innocence had a color. My mother dabbed at her eyes before anything even started, which told me she intended to perform grief before facts had the chance to speak. My father looked tense, tired, and furious under the surface. The judge was a woman in her 60s with the kind of face that told me she had no patience for manipulation disguised as concern. That helped. My family's attorney began by painting me exactly the way Ethan predicted he would. A grieving young woman, isolated, overwhelmed, emotionally compromised by loss, unable to responsibly manage a valuable inherited property. He said my parents had acted only out of concern for preserving family harmony and avoiding financial mismanagement. family, harmony. I nearly looked down at the binder in my lap, just to keep myself from smiling at how absurd that sounded after the week they had put me through. Ethan stood when it was his turn and did not waste a second on dramatics. He started with dates. He always started with dates. He walked the court through the trust formation, the execution, the notarization, the recording. Then he laid out my grandparents' care history and who had actually been present during those years. He presented the nursing statement. He submitted the expense logs. He showed copies of my travel records and the invoices in my name for maintenance and household necessities. He did not say I loved them more. He did something better. He showed I had done more. Then he asked for the audio recording to be admitted. My mother's lawyer objected. The judge listened to the basis, looked at the transcript Ethan had prepared, and admitted it for limited consideration. When my grandfather's voice played through the courtroom speakers, thin but unmistakably clear, something inside me steadied. He said he was not confused. He said he was protecting the house from people who saw it as money. He said he chose the granddaughter who had been there. My mother stared straight ahead. Chloe stopped pretending to take notes. My father shifted once, then went completely still. If the hearing had ended there, I think we already would have won. But Ethan was not done. He introduced Chloe's email about hosting an engagement dinner before listing the property. Her lawyer tried to call it casual brainstorming. Ethan countered with the text where she complained I was delaying the renovation timeline. Then came the message about pushing the debt angle. Ethan did not reveal everything at once. He layered it. That was the brilliance of it. First greed, then planning, then motive. Finally, he moved to my father's finances. He did not need to expose every private detail. He only needed enough to show why the urgency existed. There were debts. There was pressure. There was a reason the family wanted fast control over a high-value asset. My father's attorney objected again, but the judge allowed a narrow line of questioning on motive. That was when everything broke. Ethan asked my father whether he had told me on multiple occasions that family should handle this privately to avoid embarrassment. My father said yes. Ethan asked whether he had proposed shared management after learning about the trust. My father said yes again. Ethan asked whether the family had given me 2 days to vacate before any court ruling. My father hesitated, then said they had offered a transition plan. The judge looked up at that wording. Even she could hear the spin in it. Then Ethan asked the question that finally stripped the mask off. He asked, "Mr. Carter, were you under financial pressure at the time you attempted to force access to the house?" My father tried to dodge. He said every family has pressures. Ethan asked again, more specifically, "Were you or were you not seeking immediate control of the property because you believed a sale or refinancing could relieve those pressures?" My father looked at the judge, looked at his own lawyer, and then looked at me. For 1 second, I saw the old instinct in him, the one that always chose dominance over caution. And then he said the sentence that ended them. He said, "We only needed her to stop being selfish long enough to sign so the family could stabilize things." The courtroom went quiet in that total way rooms do when someone has just admitted too much to ever take it back. He had turned concern into strategy and family into leverage in a single sentence. The judge asked him to clarify. He tried to walk it back. He said he meant everyone would benefit. But the damage was done. The petition was no longer about protecting me from mismanaging property. It was about pressuring me to surrender control of it. When the judge ruled, she was precise and cold. She upheld the trust. She denied the challenge in full. She recognized me as the lawful sole trustee. She found no credible evidence of undue influence and noted that the documentary record overwhelmingly showed I had been the primary caregiver and property steward. Then she addressed my family's conduct. She criticized the attempt to pressure me into vacating before legal resolution. She ordered them to pay a substantial portion of my legal fees. She also entered a civil order barring them from entering the property or contacting me outside legal channels for 2 years unless I expressly agreed in writing. My mother cried for real then, not because she had lost me, because she had lost control of the story. Chloe looked like someone had knocked the air out of her. Later, I learned her fiancé's family postponed their financial contribution to the wedding after realizing the house she had hinted would become part of their future was never hers to use. The wedding did not end, but the fantasy did. My father walked out of court looking smaller than I had ever seen him. In a town like ours, people do not need a formal scandal to know what happened. They only need enough truth to start connecting dots. Within 2 weeks, he quietly resigned from a local fundraising board he had always used to polish his reputation. No one announced why. No one had to. My mother called once more from an unknown number that evening and left a voicemail I never answered. She said I had humiliated the family. I listened to it while standing in my kitchen and thought, no. You did that yourselves the moment you tried to throw me out of a house I had spent years protecting, while you were too busy planning what you could do with it once the old people were gone. I went back to Stonemill Point the same afternoon the hearing ended. The drive felt shorter than usual, maybe because for the first time in weeks I was not driving toward a threat. I was driving home. The house looked exactly the same from the road, which I loved more than I can explain. The same stone walls. The same weathered porch railing, the same stand of trees bending slightly in the wind off the water. Nothing about it announced victory. It was just still there, which was enough. I unlocked the front door and stepped into the silence that had held me together more times than I could count. I stood in the foyer for a minute without taking off my coat. Then I walked to the kitchen, set the kettle on, and reached for the old ceramic mug my grandfather used every morning. It had a small chip near the handle and a faded blue rim. I took my tea to the back porch and sat down where the light hit the boards in late afternoon. From there, I could see the water and the edge of the garden my grandmother loved even after she stopped remembering the names of half the flowers in it. I thought I would feel triumphant in some loud, blazing way. I did not. What I felt instead was clean, clear. Like the pressure in my chest had been released one careful turn at a time. I did not save the house because I was stronger than everyone else, or smarter than everyone else, or colder than everyone else. I saved it because I stayed when staying was hard. That was the whole truth. I stayed when the doctor's updates got repetitive and sad. I stayed when the bills needed paying and the groceries needed carrying and the nights felt too long. I stayed when there was nothing glamorous about it, nothing profitable about it, and no audience to clap for me. And in the end, that mattered more than charm, more than entitlement, more than blood. That is the lesson I keep coming back to. Blood can make people related, but it does not automatically make them loving, safe, or worthy of trust. Real family is not defined by who demands access when something becomes valuable. Real family is defined by who stays present when life becomes difficult, inconvenient, and unphotogenic. There is something else this story taught me, and I think it matters for anyone listening who has ever been manipulated by the word family. Love without boundaries can be exploited. Kindness without documentation can be rewritten. And loyalty without self-respect can turn into a cage. Protecting yourself does not make you cruel. Keeping records does not make you calculating. Refusing to surrender what you built, preserved, or cared for does not make you selfish. Sometimes the most responsible thing a person can do is put compassion and evidence in the same hand. That is not bitterness. That is wisdom. I looked out across the water, took a slow sip of tea, and thought about how badly I used to want my parents to become the people I kept hoping they were underneath all the control and performance. But peace came when I stopped waiting for that version of them and started believing the version they had already shown me. The house was quiet. The porch boards creaked softly under my chair. Somewhere down by the water, a gull cried once, and then everything settled again. I was still 27. I was still alone on that porch. But for the first time in a long while, alone did not feel like abandoned. It felt like free. If you have ever had someone use family, guilt, or obligation to push you out of a place you earned through love and sacrifice, I hope this story reminds you that your silence does not have to mean surrender, and your kindness does not require self-betrayal. And before I leave you here on this porch with me, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are, because I want to know how far this story traveled and whether any part of it felt a little too familiar.